Halo Infinite multiplayer is here, and if you're like me, then the default settings for the game don't feel quite right. This guide will cover the video, UI, and accessibility settings first, and then the controller settings I use for those that use a controller to play. If you play mouse and keyboard, I'll let you know now that I cannot give good advice on settings for those, so I won't try to. Let's get straight into the settings that I've found to be the most beneficial and which helped me get a diamond placement in the ranked arena playlists, and if you placed better than diamond, I would still say these settings are worth giving a try. First up is the video settings and field of view. The default is around 80 degrees but can go as high as 120 degrees. The greater your field of view, the more you'll be able to see and better awareness you'll have. As a quick warning, if you've never turned up field of view before, you may have to adjust to it as it will give a fisheye effect at first. I set my field of view to 120 degrees and it's what I'd recommend trying to get used to, but if that's too much, you can always set it to a more comfortable middle ground around 105 degrees. Keep in mind that if you're on the Xbox One, you may not have access to this option. I'm on the Series X, but it's worth checking to see if you do. Next is the graphics quality, and you want to have this on performance mode as this will give you the best frames per second. For the sensory settings, you want to turn down/turn off all the options except for sharpening, which you'll want to crank up to 100%. While these effects give added layers of immersion, they also make it harder for you to clearly see your opponents. That's it for the video settings, and I'm going to skip over the audio settings and go straight into UI settings. You may consider switching the multiplayer scoreboard control over from tap to hold/released based on your preference. I would recommend having enemy names shown for better callouts and also to turn off all UI visual effects for better clarity. Then what you'll really want to do is scroll down to the bottom where you can find weapon offsets. Weapon offsets move where the weapon you are holding appears on your screen. The only one I think is worth adjusting is the vertical offset. I put this all the way to -100% for every weapon type. This lowers the weapon in your visual field, which reduces the space it takes up on your screen, giving you a less obstructed view. So that's it for UI, and the only important part of accessibility settings is that it is another place to find the sensory settings that should also be located in the video settings, those that allow you to turn down/off the blur, screen shake, exposure, and so on. Alright, now let's get into the controller settings. For me, this was a big one because the default settings felt really bad for me personally. First off, you can disable vibration if you want, and it probably is the better way to go. I use hold to zoom, movement assisted steering, and maintain sprint. I turn off both auto clamber and step jump to prevent unintentional clambers and so that my jump height isn't affected by my surroundings. I set my look acceleration to 3 and both the horizontal and vertical sensitivities to 7. I found these settings to give a nice balance between allowing fine control of my aim at long range and more quick changes in aim at closer range, at least with my 120 degree field of view. You can also tweak zoom sensitivities individually for each weapon to your liking, but I personally just leave them all at their defaults. For Deadzones, this really depends on your controller and how precise the thumbsticks are. I only mess with the center Deadzones and recommend putting them as low as possible without experiencing drift. For me, that was a 4.0 Deadzone for the movement thumbstick and a 1.5 Deadzone for the look thumbstick. If you lower your Deadzones and find that your character is moving on its own or that you're experiencing aim drift, you can turn down your Deadzones accordingly until it stops happening. Now finally, let's go over my button mapping, and I will preface this by saying that these settings are what work best for me. They may not be the best for you in particular, and I recommend taking a screenshot of your current settings before you change anything, just so you can revert them easily if you don't like these settings. Also, a really important reason why these settings work for me is that I have an Elite controller and use all 4 paddles for the A, B, X, and Y buttons. So first off, I like to have my melee button on my right bumper, so I map RB to melee. This requires me to remap my equipment to the left bumper and subsequently throw grenade to right stick click, and that's all I switch from the default for when I'm on foot. To keep things consistent in vehicles, I map melee to right bumper and throw grenade to right stick click. This requires me to map the ascend/brake to the B button. I know it's a little unusual, but I eventually got used to it, and it is the best way to keep the melee button consistent both in and out of vehicles, which you want to have in order not to confuse yourself. And that's pretty much it for my controller button mapping, and with that the entirety of my personal preferred settings. Here is a before and after comparison of what all default settings looks like compared to the custom ones that I use. Hopefully you found this video to be useful. If you want to see more great content, you can head over to my channel, and if you're new, consider subscribing. You're helping me feed my cat. Her name's Marshmallow. Have a great day. If you're here today, have a great Thursday, and as always,
thanks for watching.